Survivor, you can tell who's working with who just by looking at who's sleeping next to each other. But if they allowed a Casper mattress out there, forget it, because everybody would just be sleeping on the Casper mattress. You wouldn't be able to tell anything, and it would be a great strategy to have one out there, but it's also a great strategy to have a Casper mattress in your home, because the Casper mattress is an obsessively engineered mattress at a shockingly fair price. It combines the springy latex and merges it with supportive memory foam to create an award-winning sleep surface with just the right amount of sink and just the right amount of bounce. Time Magazine named it one of the best inventions of 2015, an award-winning mattress that won't disappoint, with free shipping and returns to the U.S. and Canada. I've been sleeping on a Casper mattress for the last couple of years. Nicole and I love it. You could try it out for 100 nights risk-free in your own home. If you don't love it, they'll come and they'll pick it up and refund you everything. Plus, it's made in America. So go ahead and get $50 towards any mattress purchase at our link, casper.com/Rob, and use the promo code Rob. That's casper.com/Rob with the promo code Rob. Terms and conditions apply. Hey everybody, what's going on? Rob Sesternino back here to talk with David Bloomberg once again about the reasons why the latest two survivors lost. David, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Very excited to get into another double exit assessment. What would we call this? Why two people lost? Sure.
That's right. This will be the first time that two people were voted out, though.
Yes. Of course, we had the double boot where Chris and Jessica went out, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. Time flies.
And now here we are, and the final why blank lost of the season, because 1 week from now, we'll be talking about why blank won.
That's right. We'll talk about our predictions later, but it'll be interesting to see what happens, and it's always a little more difficult when they go in with so many people into the finale, because you don't want to give anyone short shrift. But we'll deal with that when it comes.
Yeah, we'll see what comes up. It's always tough to do it with a 6-person finale, although we did it last year with why Jeremy won, so I think we have a bad experience under our belt, David.
That's right. We can power through it. I think it's more difficult for you to get all those interviews. Although I guess you'll be on the red carpet this time, so that'll make it easier.
Yeah, I'm going to go there in person and talk to everybody, and so that's going to be fun. The only thing is it's a little harder for me to remember what questions to ask, so hopefully that there is nothing that you are desperately needing to know that I forget to ask, or at the very least, hopefully Dalton Ross or Josh or Gordon Holmes or somebody else asks the question that you need to know.
Yeah. I'll start texting you during the finale.
Perfect.
And you can just write it down on your hand.
Yes. So. Yeah, I need a crib sheet. All right. So, David, how's everything else going? Good?
Good. And you know what? We were both right about Will.
Yes. Okay, good.
Although, admittedly, that was kind of telegraphed. So that was the first half. And then I'm going to say I was close with Sunday, because I don't know if you remember, but I said last week they all joined together to vote out Will, and then the remaining foursome of David targets the threesome, and either Brett or Sunday has their torch.
So I guess is David right or wrong? Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, I think Michelle has the answer to that.
David, you're right! David, you're right!
Okay, you happy now?
I am happy, yes.
Yes. Do you want that as a ringtone or for text message alert?
Yes, actually, I do. Can you send that to me when we're done with the podcast here? I wanted to bring it into one of my employees earlier this week.
Sure.
Another one to wrap up quick.
Around the house too.
Yes. It'll be the end of your employment and your marriage, but I can be happy to send
level up here, dude.
Okay. All right, so that's last week. We have 2 things to get through today with Will and Sunday. So let's go through the overview, and then for each rule, we'll talk about Will and Sunday.
I'm going to lead off by something that I haven't heard in any other podcasts, and maybe someone has brought it up elsewhere, like on a blog or another podcast.
What just happened?
But
Why wasn't I able to imprison that mirage?
Claim
You
right
didn't
here,
see the light
I have
that's
a hot
surrounding
take
it?
for you.
That means it's the beholder to another people.
What?
All right, David Bloomberg with an original hot take about Survivor Millennials versus Gen X. Go
The
for it.
mirage always
This
has
is
another
a
dimension.
Pagonging?
Give
What?
the boss the old
Yes.
the hoe.
It's a
You
well-hidden
have to be
pagonging.
able to claim it for
It's
yourself.
certainly the most interesting and entertaining pagonging ever, but it is a pagonging nevertheless.
Is David right or wrong?
Ever since Jessica was rocked out, a member of Zeke's alliance has been voted out. Zeke will
Fire whoever
Sunday.
wrote that
So you
little
got,
book in.
despite all these
It's made
schemes
on
and
the fourth
machinations,
stuff.
and despite all the swirling trust clusters, the core group of David, Ken, Adam, and Hannah have held firm. We've been talking about wanting to target David, but nobody ever does anything about it.
So then, by your logic, then the next boot will be what? Jay or Brett?
That's what I'm going to say when we get to our predictions, but it'll be more complicated, I'm sure, but that's what I'm seeing here.
It is interesting because, and a keen observation by you. I mean, technically, Will did switch sides, and so hard to say it's a pagonging when almost like if you go back to Survivor Samoa, where Russell's group, even though they were in lower numbers than the people from Galoo. Do we consider that a pagonging? I don't know what it's called when you are able to do that from a minority position of numbers, because technically they did have less numbers. Will flipped to them, and then they went back and voted out Will after that.
Right. I would make the argument that Will was sort of in the middle, which we'll get into in a little bit here. You know, if you look at the David versus Zeke sides, David's side hasn't taken a hit yet since the Jessica rock.
Since the Jessica thing. So that's interesting to know.
So obviously, this is more of an observation than an explanation for Will and Sunday. We're not going to end the podcast here. We still need to delve into these particular votes to see how they happened and what led to this point. So, we can move on, get to it, figure out the full reasons why Will and Sunday lost.
Okay, scheming and plotting. Certainly from the Will side of things, we saw that he was ready to scheme and plot because he had to work on his resume. But I think that the Sunday part of this is probably the more interesting part of the conversation as to whether you felt like that there was sufficient scheming and plotting.
Well, I find it all interesting. But, to me it seems like just about everybody left on this season and everybody who left recently on this season knows they have to scheme and plot, with maybe Ken being the exception. We have Will, we have Sunday, we have two different situations. If we look all the way back in time, Will had a web confessional during the episode when the Millennials went to Tribal Council that first time. And back then, he found himself between alliances with a choice to make. On the one hand, he didn't like everyone on the Triforce Alliance, remember them?
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, from a strategic standpoint, he believed that sticking with them would be better. So he weighed these two options and explained to us that he knew he had to look at his long-term game. Thinking short-term would have meant voting out Biggie at the time, which he wanted to do because he saw that she had no social awareness and could be a liability. On the other hand, he said that Mari didn't talk strategy to anyone, so he didn't know if he could work with her in the game long-term. Obviously, as we know, he made the right move, chose to vote strategically, keeping Figgy around for a little while, because he felt that he could at least work with her. So Will was thinking along the right lines, but he still had some problems getting in tight with other millennials at the start. In his interview with Josh, he said that he struggled to get into one alliance or another. He was kind of in between the whole time, which, that's not necessarily a bad place to be, but he wasn't considered an equal ally with anyone. He was always the fifth person in a five-person alliance. And we saw that continue into the swap, where he just kept feeling like people were using him as a number rather than a true ally. I think a lot of this came from the other players knowing he was only 18 and still in high school, because even for the other millennials, it was probably difficult to see him as an equal. My own sons are 20 and 17, and while there are times that other adults treat them more or less as equals, there are definitely other times when they, or we, don't. Both of them were still sitting at the kids' table at Thanksgiving a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, and here's the thing. Older adults, they feel like they want to guide someone who is that age in life, even though all of them had exactly the same amount of experience playing Survivor. I guess like Survivor New York, notwithstanding.
Brooklyn, David.
Brooklyn, I'm sorry. Is there a difference?
Well, I mean, in both the game and the borough, yeah, sure.
Midwestern guy here, you can tell. Yeah, Will had an uphill battle to get that point across to them, even as he wanted to get into alliances. Now, eventually, as we know, he felt the need to stand up and shout, "This is my game!" and in a much deeper voice than me. He did that by flipping on Zeke in a very public manner. We'll obviously discuss that more in the second rule. But one thing to point out here is that, as Stephen noted on Know-It-Alls, we may argue with some of Will's actions, but he definitely had a good understanding of his position within the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And that position, as I mentioned earlier, was more of an in-between position than it was as a solid ally for him.
Just to go back to the Will thing, I think that one of the interesting observations that I had from a podcast that we did before the season started, where I talked to Jamie Goodfriend, who is a sort of a generational analyst in terms of marketing, and she did say that one of the things about dealing with the millennial tribe was going to be that they wanted to be seen as equals. You know, they weren't going to be interested. If you wanted to work with them, you needed to sort of really like enroll them in that they were going to be sort of an equal partner with the older people in the game. And I think that probably a lot of people didn't always look at Will in that same way, and I think he resented certain people for it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it is interesting because he on TV, he didn't really come across as being only 18 to me. Now, maybe that's because, like I said, I have two kids. You know, they bracket him in age, so I deal with a lot of these kids from time to time, what I'll call kids. And he seemed, between his deep voice and just the way he held himself, he did seem older and more mature than some of the other kids that I have, seen and met. And hopefully none of my son's friends are listening to this and think it applies to them. But I still think, you're out there 24/7, and they already know his age, so definitely they looked at him differently than someone who had already, grown up a bit more.
What about in terms of the scheming and plotting for Sunday, though?
Well, we didn't really see her doing a whole lot of scheming and plotting. And she knows it, and she discussed that in her interviews, noting that just because they didn't show it on TV doesn't mean it wasn't happening. Sunday said she had a hand in many of the votes. Going back to the beginning, her original plan was to align with alpha males and use them as shields into the merge. Well, Brett and Chris fit the bill perfectly for her, and she worked with them throughout the game, making decisions alongside of them. She also worked with other people, like we saw her working with Jay, sometimes with Adam and Hannah at other points, and she was also providing information to various people as well. In your interview with her, she said that later in the game, she was allies with Brett and Jay, but also somewhat playing both sides with Adam. The problem was that Adam was, just playing her, as he has been with so many other people, and she noted that she felt the most betrayed by him. The other problem was that throughout the game, she was working with people, but she didn't usually seem to be pushing the action. She said in another interview that at home, she's a leader in a number of ways, but she was determined not to make herself a target by being in any kind of leadership role. But she admits that she unfortunately overcorrected and didn't take enough initiative or control of certain things like the strategic game. Her biggest move, of course, she was definitely in control, and that was getting David to waste his idol by tricking them into thinking Ken was the target. Sunday said in a web confessional back from episode 8 that you have to pay attention to what people are saying and also to what she herself is projecting to the other players. And this is, wise strategic thinking on her part. She was also doing her best to keep an eye on things, even leading up to the vote that ended with Zeke leaving, when she said that she checked in with Will multiple times to make sure he was on their side, for example. The problem, of course, is that Will, like I mentioned with Adam, was lying to her. And Hannah also lied to her throughout the game, and especially in what was her final vote. I do think this may be one place where she was at a disadvantage. Some people we've seen are like human lie detectors. Others are paranoid enough that they just assume everyone is lying. Sunday seemed to be more trusting, more willing and able to believe people, and I think some of the other players definitely took advantage of that. So from that aspect of scheming and plotting, she just wasn't able to keep up with the lies.
In terms of scheming and plotting too much, I feel like we probably have to give Sunday a pass, and Will is going to be the focus of rule number 2.
Well, you are right that Will's going to be the focus, but we can't quite give Sunday a pass. However, we will move through the topics with her fairly quickly. In general, like you said, she was mostly okay, but there were two situations that did cause issues for her in this role. The first relates to her relationship with Jessica, which we'll go into in more detail later, but this is the same question that we had about Chris, which was whether she backstabbed Jessica too soon.
Mm-hmm.
When we discussed this with Chris, we came to the conclusion that it wasn't necessarily too soon given the dynamics at the time, because Chris, Sunday, and Brett just didn't feel they could trust Jessica, to the point that they actually trusted some of the millennials more. And, they believed that they were, at the time, in an alliance that held the majority. So, I guess we'll come to the same conclusion with Sunday as we did with Chris, that it wasn't necessarily too soon in that particular instance. But Sunday had another issue here, and that is that Sunday was not playing on her own. She and Brett were a solid pair who would almost certainly always vote as a unit. As listeners should certainly know by now, this rule warns against having an open duo, because having two people together like that makes them especially dangerous, and that becomes even more true as the numbers get lower and lower. Sunday herself said in one interview that she probably would have stuck with Brett as they got closer to the end, taking him to the final 3, so it would be those two and one other person. In a game where people were talking about one person switching sides, potentially being a kingmaker, having two people able to switch sides, that could really throw a wrench into the works.
For Will?
So, Will, as I said, is going to, have a little bit longer discussion. And it's a little bit more complicated, even though it seems maybe like it might be straightforward. Did Will scheme and plot too much and backstab Zeke too soon? Well, Will himself said in interviews that he did, just as Zeke said he himself moved too soon against David after being voted out last week. In all of Will's interviews, including the one he did with you, Will essentially said that he swung the pendulum too soon. He should have waited to backstab Zeke. And he also said he should have trusted Jay more, meaning that by not doing so, he was...
Not the actor Jay Moore.
No, not the actor Jay Moore. That will have to wait until Celebrity Survivor.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was, Will didn't want to make the move against Zeke with Jay because he was afraid Jay would get all the credit. And I think one thing he didn't foresee is that by doing it himself, he ended up getting all the blame. He also told Josh in their interview that besides waiting a week, another thing maybe he shouldn't have done was tell Ken. And I would say, apparently, that's the case.
Apparently, yeah. No, he didn't know there was going to be a pop quiz coming on it.
Right. Looking back in time a bit, we already discussed how Will felt he was not being given equal status among his allies, and he was worried there was almost nothing he could do to make the jury give him $1 million because he's 18. So he felt he had to try even harder to make his mark on the game. Earlier, I complimented Will on knowing his place in the tribe. I'm not sure if he had the same read on the jury. He said in his interview with Josh that he would look at the jury and see Michelle, Chris, and especially Taylor looking at him like he was a little kid. And that made him freak out and drove him to make that big move. I just have to wonder how he was getting that kind of specific read from them, just from the looks on their faces, especially from someone like Taylor. I do agree that Will had an uphill climb, but I wonder how much he was imprinting his own worries into the jury's minds as he was trying to read their faces.
Right.
Now, We obviously know what happened at that point. Even Ken said in a web confessional that Will made a move that was too big at the wrong time. But was there more to it than that? I would say yes. While the situations were not identical, I think that they are similar enough to a certain Christy from your season and Dolly from Vanuatu. Now, not that I need to tell you, but to remind listeners, both of them were in situations where they were between two alliances and refused to make a promise to either. In both cases, the other members of the tribe realized that they were vulnerable to this indecision and joined together to vote out the swing vote. This was a little different because Will was able to swing once before getting cut down, and he did make promises. As I said earlier, he repeatedly reassured Sunday that he was voting with Zeke's group, not against them. But as Penner noted on the recap podcast, while Will did vote with David's alliance, he didn't do so as part of that alliance. In the process, he caused that alliance to waste an idol. So after Will fooled them all once, they weren't going to let him enact his full pendulum strategy and swing in both directions to fool them twice.
Yeah.
In his CBS interview, Will flat out said that he was voted out because he could not be trusted. He was lying and trying to make too many big moves. And he added that after he voted out Zeke, people realized they could not trust him, and it was evident that he was willing to play hard to win, and he even called his own gameplay erratic as evidence of that. It appears, in looking back, that there might have already been something of an impression of Will not being fully trustworthy, because all the way back in one of Figgy's post-game interviews, she said that she considered Will to be a rat who was running around all over the place. Now, it's not clear why, but that thought was out there, and I also remember seeing at least one other post-game interview with a player suggesting something similar, though I now can't remember exactly who it was. So I feel like a few people had impressions already that he might not be the most trustworthy, probably because he wasn't solid in any one alliance, as he had said. And as part of all his swinging, he caused that to come to the forefront even more. And also that swinging obviously meant he was not keeping his scheming secret. I know that we've heard that there was a lot of discussion out there this season about everyone's strategy, that people were just talking about it openly. But I still don't think that means each player should get fully involved in it. And when Will got to the point of flat out saying in tribal council, my original plan was to flip on Z, well, I really don't think anyone should be fully revealing everything in that way.
David, so rule number 3 is to be flexible. I'm interested to get your take on the both of them, because I think that there were probably some issues with both of them in terms of their flexibility.
Well, I think it's pretty clear from what we've already discussed regarding Will that he knew he had to avoid locking himself into just one alliance. We saw that part of the problem was Will becoming a little too flexible at the end and nobody knowing which way that pendulum might bend. But as for Sunday, she said in a web confessional this week that she knew she needed to be flexible. Okay, she was obviously right. I'm not sure if she knew this already or if she learned it from her kids, who, they'll try anything 80 different ways.
And I feel like my kids that are millennials, they'll give anything a try. They'll try it with anybody, and they'll try it 80 different ways.
I mean, that's the definition of being flexible.
Oh, yeah, it is. So whether she, learned it from her kids or knew it herself, she noted that she came in and wanted to be adaptable and flexible, not be stuck with one person, to be able to switch when she needed to switch and stay when she needed to stay. To extend this idea, Sunday said in interviews that if she had made it to the end, one of the things that she would have talked about was switching her alliances when she needed to and not getting stuck in one place, such that she would only vote with certain people. And that idea follows this rule very nicely. But I don't know if I was a juror that I would have fully bought it. I mean, okay, she switched to vote out Paul, but then she felt bad about it and went back to her solid allies, Chris and Brett.
Mm-hmm.
She joined David's group to vote out Will, but other than that, I don't remember much jumping around like she talked about. Do you?
No, I don't think so. And, they were sort of really just dug in. I mean, from the Gen X side of things, like, had they been able to stick together and do a proper pagonging of the millennials, that, you figure that they all probably end up being better served by that, at least, in the short term for a couple of rounds.
Right. So, obviously, Sunday in her interviews had a different impression than what we saw. For one reason or another, she felt like she was being flexible and moving around. We, however, didn't really see that. And, I think it relates also to another part of this rule where I feel like she was a bit iffy, is this rule says you should have your finger on the pulse of each tribe member so you can always be in the majority. And we know that wasn't the case because I mentioned earlier, people just kept lying to her, and she believed them. So, no, unfortunately, she was not as flexible and did not have her finger on the pulse as much as she could have.
Okay, David. Rule number 4 is don't let your emotions control you. I mean, I do recall some times when Will's emotions got a little out of hand.
Well, a little bit, and, Sunday as well, we'll deal with that too. But I think Will knew what to do, and, back in the first rule, I talked about that first millennial vote where Will was trying to decide whether to go against Mari or Figgy. And he said at the time he had to decide between the person he liked but couldn't work with or a person he hated but could work with, and he chose game over emotions. So he made the correct decision there. The need to vote against his emotions actually happened several times throughout the game. He noted that everyone was very comforting to each other, no matter what side they were on, which was indeed something I think we'd seen from time to time this season also, and in fact, it somewhat confused predictions, at least on my part a few times, because, for example, he and Hannah were often on opposite sides of the vote, but they also had what he described as a brother-sister type relationship. We would see these secret scenes or these what maybe seemed to be unimportant scenes on the show of people all being friendly and talking to each other, but then they go against each other in the votes. And that was, confusing and made it hard to predict what was going to happen. But, it was because he was not playing with his emotions. And, another similar case, he admired Zeke. He had been very close to Zeke.
Sports in the game. Get the new Xbox One S.
She said she was reminded that she's here for her family, not someone she just met.
Peggy 12.
She knew she shouldn't just vote with her emotions out of loyalty, for example, to keep someone who would keep her in the game. And apparently her kids gave her that same exact advice before leaving. But there was at least one emotional moment out there, and it turned into a big theme. We finally got some answers about what happened between Jessica, as I had suspected all along. It mostly had to do with emotions. Sunday told you that after the Paul vote, she went back to Brett and Chris, but she didn't get things worked out with Jessica. Came down, voted against Jessica just before the next Nothing he did contributed to people saying, "Oh, that Will, he's a jerk. We got to vote him out." Everything was good. Sunday, on the other hand, was actually using the social game as her primary weapon. Zeke said in his post-game interview with Josh that Sunday had a tremendous social game that was very subtle and quiet, and that she was friends with everyone.
PS4.
He emphasized that the reason Hannah and Adam bit on Penn's name at the Rock Crime Tribal Council was that both thought they were in tight with Sunday. She had a very trusting relationship with a lot of people. Now, we saw already that trust may have come back to bite her on several occasions. But Zeke continued that she was playing very intentionally into the mom archetype. I would say
only your heart is calling you to be patient.
That's not true. My heart is strong. I'll prove it.
You telling me that you think the world can be saved by just people? We have to at least try. I want the three of us to form an alliance.
But alliances are forbidden, I said.
Trust no one but myself.
Which will lead to the heat-laid war.
We don't even know who the traitor is yet.
Didn't you think for a second that your actions could be making things worse than they already are?
Guess you better get started then. Unfortunately, you'll have to go alone. What about the others?
Now I can be one with darkness.
Papa, are you okay?
And going into her vote, she said in a web confessional it didn't make any sense to send her out with two big threats left in the game, so she thought she'd be okay. I would say many viewers and podcasters and bloggers have echoed that very same sentiment since she was voted out. So, was she a threat? Yeah, sort of. Sunday, Sadie T.
Can I get an encore? You want more?
Nice to see you, big guy. Instead,
Get the
the question
new
comes
Xbox
back
One S.
to what you brought up. Is she a threat to take the GOAT spot? So is she a threat by not being a threat? Now, we have to kind of wrap our brains around that.
If we are ever to strike down Salem, 7 sleeping keyholes must be found and unlocked. You've been here many times. We lived again and again. Like deja vu. What's written in the last page of the book is trash. We are here to make sure that light lives on. If we don't do something, light will expire.
But Master, isn't there anything we can do? Yeah, them.
Can you see me?
Of course. I see them too. Wait, you know this place, Aqua? I visited once, and I met 2 boys I considered passing the Keyblade to.
So we're saved new ones. And I heard him call my name. There are so many monsters that are connected to it. Sora, see? That's why it has to be. Everyone wants to know about the lost page.
If everyone's collecting light, it's only for themselves.
They are hopes your guiding key. I say it all the time. You ultimately need to do what your heart feels is right.
They are what's your guiding key? There's a phrase no one seems to ages. It's something I like to try and remember.
You were on a long time. What were you doing?
Secret.
I'm back.
So, we get what we get, and we've kind of got to read between the lines.
Okay, David. So read between the lines of vote out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong.
All right, so we've been stuck on the strong for a long time. And although I like both Will and Sunday, I have to say we finally moved to the weak category.
Okay.
You and others might be saying that David is strong and he should have been targeted. We should have stayed with the strong, keep going after the big threats, the David. But you have to remember that this part of the rule talks about targeting strong players outside your alliance when it talks about the strong. After that's done, you switch. And as I mentioned earlier, it's become clearer and clearer to me that we're seeing a belonging. So you are switching to outside your alliance. That means it's time to cull the herd a bit and get rid of some of the players who couldn't protect themselves. Both Will and Sunday fell into this category. They're outside the core alliance, and they were weaker members who were not being protected at the time. And so it switched back to getting rid of the weak.
David, you have these appendices, do whatever it takes to get the idols. So in the case of Sunday, no real idol business going on. Will did have knowledge of Jay's idol, and he did touch on that in my exit interview with him, why that was so important to get rid of Michaela.
Right. And, he was at least out there hunting idols and was there when Jay found that idol. Apparently at one point, Will said in an interview, I don't remember if it was yours or not, he was holding the log or whatever had the idol in it. They just didn't realize it had the idol, and so he was kind of kicking himself for that one. And then he did get to blow up Jay's idol to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, Sunday, we didn't see anything dealing with Sunday and idols, other than I can't remember. I feel like she was out on the Gen X idol hunt after David used his first one and then refound it.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly nothing in particular springs to mind.
And then the final appendix is the final tribal council. Now, obviously, both of these players were thinking a lot about the final tribal council.
They were. Will was looking ahead to the jury and preparing his resume, like we've heard, 100 times. He wanted that $1 million job interview. And he also had ideas about who he wanted to take to the end. He had said he wanted either Brett and Sunday or Adam and Hannah. And as a matter of fact, those four were in his ideal final five, so he could then decide which direction he would want to take. So yeah, he had lots of plans. Unfortunately, he had to get to there and couldn't. I would also say Sunday was looking ahead and trying to figure out the best way to succeed as well, although obviously it was a different path than Will. One difference is where she was going to go with Brett. And then the question was, okay, who was she going to try to take with in that final three? I think she had made mention of Adam or Hannah as well. And she also knew what she was going to say if she made it to the end. I had mentioned that she was going to talk about her social game. And so she was brushing up her resume as well. It just had two different skill sets there.
Any final thoughts on Will and Sunday before we look ahead to the finale?
As I mentioned, over the course of the past couple weeks, I was beginning to think the rest of the season would just be me saying each person was voted out because they were a threat. But even in a super strong group of players, there are a few who are not quite considered to be the same type of threat. Though sometimes those are the ones who go on to win the game because they use the others as shields. Neither of those possibilities happened here. Both Will and Sunday had some threatening aspects, but that wasn't the main cause for the votes against them. Will, by his own later admission, made too big a move at the wrong time. He wanted to show that he could really play this game, but at the same time, he also showed that he couldn't necessarily be fully trusted by either side. Will himself said in an interview that it was interesting to watch the progression on TV of him thinking he was the king to getting blindsided. He learned that arrogance will take you down hard. Sunday didn't have that problem, but she did set into motion a series of events leading to this point due to her feud with Jessica. It's obviously impossible to know how things would have turned out if they had been able to work together. But we know that the path they actually went down didn't end up well for either. More importantly, at this point, Sunday was part of an open duo with Brett, which can be a little scary as the numbers get whittled down. For both players, they did many things right, but also a few things that got them in trouble. In both cases, though, flipping on an old ally started them down the path to getting voted out at this point, and that is why Will and Sunday lost.
All right, David. So finale night coming up on Wednesday. What do you want to talk about? You want to predict the final three? You want to predict the winner? I'm sure you have it all mapped out.
I have it mapped out. It's a crazy map.
Okay.
Let's work backwards a bit.
Is it more of a map or a maze?
Probably a maze.
Oh boy.
I'll be amazed if I get it right.
Yeah. Okay.
So working backwards.
What happens when we get to the center?
We get to the center, a Minotaur comes out and beats us.
Okay.
Isn't that the way it works?
I've seen it go a couple different ways.
Oh, okay. One thing that is very interesting to me, and I'm very happy about, is it looks like this may be one of the least bitter juries ever. Because it seems like none of them hold a grudge. As just one example, Zeke and Will were hanging out in a hammock in Ponderosa, even though Will was the one who had sent Zeke packing just a few days earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Will said in one interview that they are all very much fans and players of the game who respect the game so much that they're not going to take it personally. So that's the thought I'm keeping in mind when I'm making my predictions here.
Yeah, and just to echo that, this is a really great cast. We were very lucky this season. It's not always the case with these Survivor seasons, these Big Brother seasons, and especially these BBOTT seasons. So we should definitely be sure to count our blessings with this Survivor cast.
That's right. Hey, are you calling me a bitter juror for BBOTT?
I wasn't even possibly thinking that, David.
Okay. Well, I was on Twitter, okay. I think the easiest way to do this is talk about who can't win, because that's the simpler, group to start with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how Hannah can win against anybody but maybe Brett. And the problem is she will presumably be against two people, which tells me Hannah cannot win.
Okay.
Sunday specifically singled her out in interviews to talk about how she didn't like how Hannah was playing. There was a brief discussion on Twitter involving Steven and a couple other people about whether Hannah could say, well, David's only here because I let him be here. And, could that be a good argument? Personally, I would say no, not really, because I just don't think the jury would really give her that much credit. So, what do you think? Can Hannah win?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, again, I have watched, 55 days of a Survivor season and said a person couldn't win. So anything is possible, but based on the knowledge that I have, I would not think it was likely.
Okay. So
yes. In the words of Taylor Stocker.
Unlikely.
Yes. But still, so you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah. I mean, a meteor could come down and hit everyone else,
As Penner put it, an atom bomb could go off.
So, okay. Next one up. I also don't see how Ken can win. And I would go so far as to say if Ken does somehow win, it will somewhat invalidate all of the huge strategic gameplay throughout the season.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a room full of strategic sharks, Ken is Mr. Squiddington.
Squiddington to you.
Squiddington.
No, Sir Squiddington. Sir Squiddington.
Sir. Sorry.
But David, isn't there? I know you've studied David Nash and game theory in a season where everybody is a strategist who is really trying hard to figure out every angle. I mean, doesn't the person who is the opposite of that have a bit of an advantage?
Not when the jury is made up of those same players who have given all indications that they will vote for someone who shared those values.
Okay.
So,
and apologies to John Nash. I don't know who David Nash is.
No, okay.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash? I don't know. Sorry about that.
It might be. So I thought you were going to, sing about Sweet Judy Blue Eyes. I have a similar feeling about Brett. Not quite the same as Ken. And he's certainly been more fun than Ken and somewhat more strategic. He still hasn't been pushing the action. So I don't see him winning either. I don't know if you share that opinion.
The Penner quote actually comes from him talking about the chances that Brett could win the game. So, yeah, he says it seems even more unlikely than Hannah.
Okay. So, that leaves us with three possibilities. Adam, David, and Jay. The only way I can see Adam winning is by removing both David and Jay. And I just don't think he can do that. I think he's run out of time. I think he loses to either of them. And so if he can't get rid of both of them, I don't see how he wins.
It's interesting because I could see a way how he could beat David. I think that would be a pretty interesting vote, Adam and David, because David certainly has the better resume or the reputation in the game, but I feel like that Adam has more friends on the jury.
Yeah, but he has more friends he's screwed over on the jury, too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean, I do say, I am talking about them not being bitter, but there's being bitter and then there's being repeatedly screwed over. If Jay ends up on that jury, yeah, he may vote for Adam, but on the other hand, how many times did Adam make him a promise and then not go through with it?
Right, but how could he not vote for Adam after that scene that we had with the two of them on the hammock?
Well, that's true, and there was also a web confessional of Jay saying, one, he wants to take Adam along with him, and also he would give him his vote in all likelihood because he knows that Adam is playing for his family and he's just not going to do something goofy like some of these other players in the game. So you may be right about Jay in particular. But
and then you have a couple of those back row jury people like Taylor and like Michelle. What do they ultimately end up doing in an Adam versus David and then throw in some random person like a Hannah? How do they ultimately end up swaying?
They vote for the Green Party.
Right. Right. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think that it's because they really have no strong ties to David. I know Michelle was on the tribe with him post swap, but it didn't seem like that held any water. So I really think that there are a lot of toss ups in this thing.
Well, I do agree. I think that David can make the case and should make the case that he has played strategically the whole way, and even as the biggest threat, he has stuck around.
Mm-hmm.
And then Adam has his own points to make as well. I just think in the end, David beats Adam.
Also, I think that Adam has the emotional pull with a lot of these players. I'm sure that the story about his mom is going to come up in a final tribal council if he does get there against David. I just think that he has a lot of outs against David. I think the problem for Adam is that I still feel like he's number 4 in the alliance that we're talking about of Adam, David, Hannah, and Ken.
Yeah, I think you're right there, too. So it will be more difficult for him to get there. If he does get there, it'll be close. It'll be one of the closest battles. But I still think he loses. But I also think you're probably right that we never find out because he gets knocked out of there before.
So then, if we're taking Adam off of the table, and it sounds like that you are, it seems like that you are really stuck between David and Jay.
Right. And I think either of them wins if they're up against anyone else except the other.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. And I feel like David wins in a head-to-head battle. The question is if they can make it to that point. So, at the beginning of the podcast, I planted my flag. I said, this is a pagong. If I'm right, and the trend continues, Jay or Brett will be the next one voted out, likely depending on who wins immunity. There has been so much talk of Adam or Hannah flipping, and so many opportunities for them to do so, but it just hasn't happened. So I still don't think it'll happen now. If Jay does not win the next immunity challenge, it seems like almost a certainty that he will be voted out. But then again, we've said David seemed like a certain target for several votes. Everyone, without fail, has been talking about how big a threat David is. This means one of two things to me. David wins, or David is immediately targeted, just the same way I said Jay might be immediately targeted. As I said, I don't see a way David makes it to the final 3 and loses, even to Jay. So, is everyone saying that David is a huge threat a signal that he's going to win, or a distraction because he's finally going to get that's why I lose it. I don't know. I start thinking at multiple levels.
See, I see things a little differently. I think that David is probably the winner, but I think that he definitely can lose to Jay, and I think he can also lose to Adam.
Okay. Well, before we get to that, I think the only chance to break up the inevitable steamroll to the end for David's side would be Jay winning enough immunities to either beast his way to the final 3, or at least giving him time to get into Adam's head and finally convince him to actually go through with the flip. If he does that and gets rid of David, then Jay wins. And there have been signals that Jay and Adam will actually work together to get to the end, especially in the most recent episode. Jay told Adam, it's me and you till the end. Even though we know Adam said he does not want to go to the end with Jay, I just feel like we're being told it's going to end up that way. And then Jay re-emphasized it in a web confessional for this episode, after Adam shared the information about his mother, like I said earlier, that he wants to go to the end with Adam if possible. So I've kind of taken you through all my thinking, which I realize may be a bit discombobulated, or as you said earlier, a maze. I think that's because I have two sides warring in my head here. I feel like most of the season has been about David. He's been driving both the strategic and storytelling action. Not to get into the wiggle room about the storytelling, but so much recently has been suggesting a Jay and Adam pairing that I just can't ignore. And Jay does have a good story to tell, in that he was effectively dead in the water at one point, managed to make it to the end, practically by sheer force of will, in not the player will, in knowing not to use his idol in several earlier votes, winning immunities, keeping his head down, things like that. And then if he gets to the end by getting rid of David, that's just a perfect capstone on his story. So it's almost, for me, flip coin. But there's one overriding fact that keeps pushing me back towards David.
He has the same name as you. We know.
That's it.
Is that really it?
No, that is not really it. It is the Pagong. And the fact that David's allies have repeatedly gravitated back towards saving him, even when we as viewers think it's crazy. Rob, we saw this before. We saw this in Second Chances. It happened that way for Jeremy. I think it may happen that way again for David. And so that's my final prediction. David will win.
David will win. I am leaning towards that as well, David being the winner, but I do think that there are some big potholes that he has to worry about. I think that he will win in the end if he's sitting there with Brett, Hannah, or Ken. Any combination of those people, I think that David is the winner of the season. I think he has a lot of problems with Jay. I think that Jay is the biggest jury threat on the board because, take a look at some of the people that are sitting there on the jury. Taylor is a vote for Jay. Michelle is a vote for Jay. Will's probably a vote for Jay. I think Brett and Sunday are most likely to vote for Jay. That's 5 votes for Jay if he gets there. I think he beats almost anybody. I think he does beat anybody.
Yeah, you may be right.
Especially because if he gets there, it will be because of some combination of either amazing strategy or an immunity run. And we know that, going back to Worlds Apart, that Mike Holloway had a lot of problems in his game when he won all those immunities. You get to a point where the jury just has to say, okay, you beat us so badly, we just have to give it to you.
Yeah, you may be convincing me that in a David Jay finale that Jay wins.
Jay wins if he gets to the end.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's another reason they just have to, David's group just has to Pagong him, or else, they're in trouble. I don't think David and Jay both make it to the end.
No, I don't think so. I think that Jay has to go out. They have to get rid of Jay. If he at any point doesn't have immunity, you have to take him out for this reason.
Right. And on the flip side, if Jay flips someone, they're going to go after David.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't think we will see a Jay and David now. I think it will be one of them against other people that they can more easily beat.
And then Adam's the wild card for me. If Adam gets there, I think that he has a chance to beat David.
He has a chance, but I don't think it's a very good chance.
And I think he could inherit some of that Jay support. I think just going back to the primaries, it's okay, now this candidate is gone. Now, who are they advocating for on the jury? And I feel like that, Jay just has no connection to the side with the David and Ken and Hen. He just is such a wild card in terms of, and he has a lot of sway with that jury in terms of the Taylors and the Michelles and even Brett and Sunday.
Yeah, it's tough to read. I just don't know if certain players will think what Adam did is good strategic gameplay. And that's where it's hard to draw the line. Sunday, despite the fact that she never voted with David, really, has said she had a good relationship with David, and as I said in interviews, has been calling him the biggest threat. Well, if you're calling him the biggest threat, do you then turn around and vote for someone else in the end? I don't think so. So I really do think that David gets pretty much all the Gen X votes.
Yes.
And then probably he gets Zeke. And what that means is, we're getting to a very close race here.
It'll be a really fun finale. It should be really exciting, and we got a lot of tribal councils, a lot of different ways this could turn out. What more could we ask for in a Survivor finale, David?
Right. You've got David making a fake idol, and you've got Ken with his legacy advantage, and all sorts of craziness. It'll definitely be a lot of fun, if nothing else.
All right. So, David, great stuff. Do you have a hashtag worked out?
The only one I could think of, which is kind of ironic because I said this wasn't what happened, is hashtag GoatThreat.
Hashtag GoatThreat. All right. So, very exciting stuff, David. 1 week from now, you'll be back to talk about how the winner won, and maybe our complete worldview will be completely turned upside down for this.
That's right. It could turn out to be a goat threat.
Yes, it could be. Who knows? All right. So fun stuff. We've got another round of the Rob Has a Podcast bloggers here to get you ready for the finale. We have, of course, Michael wrapping up his analysis for the season as he looks ahead to the final six. Christian is looking at the importance of timing. It's everything, David. And, of course, Jay's idle play, Hannah's poor decision-making, and Adam's failure to act this week. Also, Christine is looking back at Amy's choice to target Eliza instead of Chris back in Vanuatu to explain Hannah's mistake with Sunday. Were you ready for that Vanuatu poll?
No, I wasn't. Well, I pulled Vanuatu also with Dolly.
Yeah, that's true. Then on Tuesday, Christine is taking a look at what the casuals are thinking as we head into the finale and theorizing about why Hannah targeted Sunday. And then this Monday, Sarah Freeman has Jury Jeopardy. And that's going to take place with the RHAP bloggers versus Reality Blurred versus Inside Survivor versus True Dark Times to predict the final three of whom the jury votes for. How about that?
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work. I used to, in the Reality News Online days, I used to pull together articles like that, the roundtable article. That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but Sarah Freeman is up to the task.
She is. Now my question about the bloggers, are any of them going to take up Jeff Probst on his offer? Because he said, if anyone wants to argue with him about whether or not making a big move is a good idea, those bloggers should give him a call and get out there and play. So I think he's casting right now. All those bloggers should get on the phone with him.
Haven't our bloggers given enough to Survivor over the last couple of seasons? Do they have to just recruit more and more of our bloggers to the seasons?
Hey, he knows what good TV is.
You're next, David.
Yeah.
That would be so fun, I think, to have you go out there and then have somebody cover why blank lost and then get it completely wrong and you'll have to go on Twitter and correct the record. It'll be like, actually, we'll get it right. It'll be great. It'll be so fun.
Yeah, obviously over the years I've thought about going, but the fact that I am on thyroid medication, have asthma, and have had a knee surgery make me a little hesitant. I see what has happened medically to some of the survivors, and it makes me a little squeamish.
All right, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. They have a fantastic medical staff there. It'll all work out. All right, David, great job. Followed at David Bloomberg. Any takes that he has between now and the finale. And we've got everything you can handle in terms of this Survivor finale coming up. Steven Fishback is going to bring you your know-it-alls, and I'm 99% sure that we are confirmed with the know-it-alls co-host for Wednesday night, but let me just not announce it just in case anything falls through. That's going to be live at 11:15 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be at the finale. Very excited to be back there. So I will get to see Sia if she is there in person once again. So excited for that. And then I will be on the red carpet doing my exit interviews with the final six. And then that podcast, the audio of that will be up on robisawebsite.com and, of course, in the podcast feed. And then we also have the video of that on our YouTube channel at robisawebsite.com/YouTube. And then David and I will go through everything why blank won.
That's right.
Plus, I'll also do feedback with Josh Wiggler the day after the finale, so make sure you get your voicemail questions in as well. robisawebsite.com/voicemail. All right, David. So looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye.